Welcome back, chosen one. Sit down, breathe. The people who once promised to bury you have gone quiet, trading their old confidence for careful glances whenever your name enters a room. Funny how that works. You have friends in high places, not the kind people usually mean when they say that. Not a name someone drops to get a table at a restaurant, the highest place there is. And what they have done to keep you standing is something you are only now becoming ready to understand. They said you were finished, said you would crumble quietly enough that nobody would ever need to ask questions about it. You did not crumble, and now they are the ones who tense up the moment your name surfaces, somewhere they assumed was safe from it. None of what they threw at you ever reached the part of you that actually mattered. Something was shielding it the entire time, long before you had a name for what that something was. Psalm 34 verse 7 names it plainly, "The angel of the Lord encamps around those who fear him, and he delivers them." Encamps, not passes by occasionally, sets up camp, the way an army sets up around something worth guarding, the silence you have been hearing from the people who used to talk about you constantly. That is not them losing interest. That is fear, the kind that makes a person's heartbeat pick up the moment your name enters a conversation they were not supposed to have. Before we go further, I need to know you are actually here for this. Comment, "I was never alone," so I know you understand exactly what this message is describing. And if this is landing somewhere true, subscribe. Because what is about to be revealed about who has been protecting you changes everything about how you walk from here forward. Because this was never luck. This was never coincidence. This was heaven running interference on your behalf the entire time you thought you were standing alone. One, their misread of your silence. Your enemies built their entire strategy on a single mistaken assumption that your quiet meant you had nothing behind you. They mistook your composure for emptiness, your patience for surrender, your refusal to explain yourself for proof you had nothing worth explaining. They were never more wrong about anything. Exodus 14 verse 14 states exactly what your silence was actually doing while they misread it. The Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still. Notice the order in that verse. Stillness is not the absence of a fight. It is the precondition for one. Moses did not tell a frightened, cornered people to be quiet because nothing was happening. He told them to be still because something enormous was already in motion, and it did not need their noise to succeed. Your enemies mistook that stillness for weakness, the same way Pharaoh's army mistook a trapped nation for an easy target right before the sea did what no army ever could. What looked like the end of the story was actually the setup for the part they never saw coming. Notice what Moses did not do in that moment. He did not argue with the people's fear, and he did not organize a counterattack against an army that outnumbered them completely. He gave one instruction, stillness, and let the actual intervention belong entirely to God. Most people find that instruction nearly impossible to follow, because stillness feels like doing nothing at the exact moment doing something feels most urgent. 1 Peter 3 verse 4 captures the specific kind of strength your quiet was actually carrying, the unfading beauty of a gentle and quiet spirit, which is of great worth in God's sight. Great worth, not weakness tolerated, worth recognized by the only audience whose opinion was ever going to matter in the end. Unfading is the word worth sitting with longest in that verse. Everything your enemies were counting on to eventually crack, your patience, your composure, your refusal to explode under pressure, was described by Peter as unfading, meaning it was never designed to wear out the way they assumed it would. Insulated is the better word. Not isolated, but kept apart from the very noise that would have made you easier to predict, easier to provoke, easier to break. Every accusation that never landed the way it was supposed to was not an accident. It was insulation doing exactly what insulation is built to do. The comment you never had to defend yourself against. The rumor that somehow never reached the one person who could have believed it. The provocation that should have gotten a reaction and simply did not, because something in you had already been reinforced long before the test arrived. None of that composure was manufactured in the moment. It had been building the entire time you assumed nothing was happening. Here is the specific shift worth naming for yourself. The next time silence gets mistaken for weakness by someone testing you, resist the urge to correct them out loud. Let the outcome correct them instead. Explanations offered too early rob the moment its power. Let the stillness finish what it already started, the same way it finished the story at the edge of a sea that should have ended everything. On a shoreline, nobody watching that morning expected to still be standing on by evening. 2. The war fought behind you. There was a war happening around you long before you ever knew you were a target in it, fought entirely out of your sight, by people whose names you will probably never learn. 2 Kings 6 verse 16 to 17 tells the account of a servant who woke up one morning to find his city surrounded by an enemy army, certain that disaster had finally arrived. Elisha's response is the entire point. "Don't be afraid," the prophet answered. "Those who are with us are more than those who are with them." And Elisha prayed, "Open his eyes, Lord, so that he may see." Then the Lord opened the servant's eyes, and he looked and saw the hills full of horses and chariots of fire all around Elisha. The servant was never actually alone. He simply could not see the reinforcement that had already surrounded him. That account is not a comforting metaphor invented to make fear feel smaller. It happened to a real person on a real morning, when the threat looked completely overwhelming from where he was standing. His eyes needed to be opened. The protection did not need to be created. It was already there. Notice what Elisha asked for. Not more soldiers, not a different outcome, only better eyesight, sight that could finally register what had already surrounded them the entire time. That is often the actual gap between fear and peace, not a missing intervention, but a missing ability to perceive the intervention that was already fully in place. Job experienced something similar from the other direction, protection he never had to ask for and rarely even noticed. Job 1 verse 10 records the accusation the enemy of Job's soul brought against God directly. "Have you not put a hedge around him and his household and everything he has?" Even Job's enemy admitted the hedge was real, was effective, and had been there the entire time. Job assumed he was simply having good fortune. A hedge does its most important work while nobody is admiring it. Nobody stands in a garden thanking the hedge for the threats it quietly turned away before they ever became visible. Its value only becomes obvious the day it is removed, and few people ever get to witness that comparison directly. Think about the specific moments in your own life that felt like narrow escapes you could never fully explain. The situation that should have ended badly and somehow did not. The conversation that could have gone a very different direction and inexplicably turned. You called it luck at the time because you had no other word for it. It was never luck. It was a hedge, a hill full of horses you were not yet allowed to see. Someone spoke on your behalf in rooms you never entered. Someone corrected a false version of your story before it ever reached your ears. Someone moved a person out of a position where they could have done you real damage, and you never once heard about it, because that is how real protection usually operates. It does not announce itself. It simply makes sure the story turns out differently than it should have. A temptation shows up once you start recognizing this pattern, to spend your energy trying to identify exactly who did what on your behalf. Resist that temptation. The gift was never meant to come with a full itemized report. It was meant to build trust that the same covering is still active in whatever you cannot currently see, which matters far more than knowing the specific mechanics of what has already passed. 3. Marked by character, not luck. Something about you was noticed long before anyone around you noticed it, And it was never your image, your platform, or your reputation. It was the specific way you carried what nobody else saw you carrying. 2 Chronicles 16 verse 9 describes exactly what that kind of attention looks like from heaven's side of things. For the eyes of the Lord range throughout the earth to strengthen those whose hearts are fully committed to him. Range throughout the earth, not a distracted glance. An active search, looking specifically for the kind of heart that stays faithful when nobody is applauding it. This particular verse was spoken as a rebuke to a king who had stopped relying on God and started relying on foreign alliances instead. The contrast matters. Asa had access to real armies and real treasure, and he still chose the wrong source of security. The eyes ranging the earth were looking for people who would trust the right source, even when a more visible option was sitting right in front of them. Joseph lived the clearest example of this pattern in all of Scripture: misjudged, sold, imprisoned on a lie, forgotten in a cell for years that must have felt endless while he waited. When he finally named what had actually been happening the entire time, Genesis 50 verse 20 preserves his conclusion: not bitterness, but clarity. You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good, to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives. Notice Joseph does not deny the harm. He simply refuses to let the harm be the final interpretation of the story. Joseph had every legal and emotional right to punish his brothers once he held the power to do it. Genesis records no hesitation in him choosing otherwise. That restraint, offered from a position of real strength rather than forced weakness, is exactly the kind of character that gets noticed by eyes ranging the whole earth looking for it. What got noticed about you was never the version of yourself performed for an audience. It was the version nobody was watching, the integrity that held when holding it cost you something, the loyalty that stayed intact when staying loyal made no strategic sense at all. That version does not announce itself. It simply gets noticed by the only eyes that were ever actually scanning for it. Consider the moment recently when doing the right thing cost you something nobody else would have known about if you had simply skipped it. Nobody applauded that decision. Nobody even knew to look for it. That is precisely the kind of moment this section is describing. The quiet choice that becomes visible only to the eyes built to notice it, no matter how invisible it stayed to everyone else in the room. It is tempting to wonder whether any of this actually matters if nobody around you ever finds out about it. It matters entirely because the audience for this kind of character was never the people around you in the first place. It was always the eyes ranging the earth, and those eyes do not require a human witness to consider something worth noticing, or to eventually make sure the right people notice it too, in whatever timing serves the story best. 4. The doors that weren't coincidence. Some doors in your life opened at a timing too precise to have been an accident, and some doors that should have opened for anyone else stayed permanently shut in front of you for reasons you are only now able to see clearly. Proverbs 21 verse 1 explains the mechanism behind timing like that. In the Lord's hand the king's heart is a stream of water that he channels toward all who please him. A king's decision in that verse is not fully his own. It is water, and water follows the direction of whoever is actually controlling the channel. The official who suddenly favored you, the stranger who vouched for you without an obvious reason, the decision-maker who quietly took your name off a list you never knew you were on, none of that was random generosity. Pay attention to the specific image chosen in that verse. Water does not need to be forced. It simply follows the channel it has been given, without resistance, without needing to understand where the channel is leading. A king's heart, described that way, is not being coerced against his will. He is simply following a course that feels entirely like his own decision, while actually being directed the whole time. Think of it the way an air traffic controller reroutes a plane around a storm system the pilot never even sees forming. The passengers feel a slight change in course and assume it was scheduled that way. They have no idea an entire decision was made on their behalf, based on information only visible from a vantage point they will never occupy. Something that's small, barely noticeable from inside the plane, may have been the difference between a routine flight and a genuine disaster. The passengers will never know how close the alternative came to happening, because the correction was made early enough that the danger never fully materialized in front of them. Revelation 3 verse 8 promises the same kind of intervention still available to you now. See, I have placed before you an open door that no one can shut. No one, not the people who wanted to close it, not the circumstances that tried to. An open door held open by an authority higher than anyone attempting to close it. The doors that stayed shut deserve the same honesty. Every door that slammed in your face at the time it happened was doing you a mercy you could not have recognized in the moment. Some closed doors are not punishment. They are redirection, keeping you off a path that would have cost you far more than the disappointment of the door itself. Consider the specific opportunity you once grieved losing, the job, the relationship, the arrangement that fell through right when you wanted it most. Look at where that closed door actually kept you from standing. Most people, given enough distance and honesty, can eventually see exactly what that door was protecting them from experiencing. Honesty like that takes real humility to reach, because it requires admitting that your own judgment at the time was incomplete, and that something outside of it was protecting you from a version of your own desire that would have cost you more than you were prepared to pay at the time you wanted it most. 5. Silenced before it ever reached you. Some threats against you never had the chance to fully form, cut off at a source you never saw, by an authority your enemies never accounted for when they made their plans. Psalm 105 verse 14 to 15 records the specific instruction given on behalf of people who had no ability to defend themselves. He allowed no one to oppress them. For their sake he rebuked kings. Do not touch my anointed ones. Do my prophets no harm. Rebuked kings, not ordinary people. The most powerful figures of their era corrected directly, on behalf of people who never even knew the correction had been issued. That is not a small detail. Kings did not typically answer to anyone. The fact that this verse records kings being rebuked on someone else's behalf tells you something about the scale of authority actually operating behind the scenes of an ordinary life. If kings could be silenced for the sake of people who never knew it happened, your own smaller threats were never beyond that same reach. Who this protection covered matters too. Not celebrities, not people with armies of their own, wandering families with no political standing, no leverage, no ability to protect themselves through ordinary means. The rebuke did not depend on their status. It depended entirely on whose they were. More than once you have wondered why a specific threat simply stopped. Why an obsession someone had with tearing you down suddenly lost its intensity, without explanation, without an apology, without you ever confronting it directly. That was not them growing bored. Something with more authority than their grievance stepped between you and it, and they felt the correction, even if they never understood where it came from. Picture the person who seemed intent on damaging your reputation, your career, your peace, who eventually just stopped, moved on to some other target, or quietly disappeared from your life altogether without you lifting a finger against them. You may have assumed you simply outlasted their interest. It is far more likely you outlasted it because something intervened on a level you were never positioned to witness. Real relief becomes available once you stop needing to understand exactly how a threat was neutralized. Some answers were never meant to be fully visible to you in this life. What matters is not the mechanism. What matters is that the threat is gone, and the same authority that handled it once is not retiring after a single use, no matter how many more threats still lie ahead of you. This does not mean every threat you face will vanish without a fight on your part. Some battles genuinely require your participation. But it does mean you are never facing anything completely alone. Even the threats that seem to resolve themselves for reasons nobody can quite explain. Learning to hold both truths at once, that some fights require your effort and some are already being fought without it, is its own kind of maturity. Assuming every battle requires your full exertion leads to exhaustion. Assuming every battle will resolve itself without you leads to passivity. Wisdom is knowing which fight you are actually standing in at any given moment and having the humility to ask rather than assume. 6. Every blow was cultivation, not cruelty. What happened to you was never only survival. It was formation, the kind that only happens under conditions nobody would choose voluntarily, and it was never wasted the way it may have felt at the time. Malachi 3 verse 2-3 lays out the process directly, using language that refuses to soften what refining actually requires. Who can endure the day of his coming? Who can stand when he appears? For he will be like a refiner's fire or a launderer's soap. He will sit as a refiner and purifier of silver. Notice the posture in that verse. Sitting, not pacing anxiously nearby. A refiner sits because the process requires patience, precision, and full attention, not because the fire is unsupervised. One question opens that verse and is worth pausing on. Who can? Everyone can, and Scripture does not pretend otherwise. Refining is not a gentle process dressed up in comforting language. It is genuinely difficult, and the fact that you are still standing after your own season of it is itself evidence of something significant. Think of it the way a blacksmith works a blade still glowing from the forge. To anyone unfamiliar with the craft, that glow looks like ruin, heat about to destroy something valuable. To the blacksmith, that same heat is the only thing capable of making the blade usable at all. The temperature is not incidental to the process. It is the entire process. A blade pulled from the fire too early stays soft, unable to hold an edge under real pressure. The discomfort of staying in the heat longer than feels bearable is not cruelty on the blacksmith's part. It is the only path to a blade that will not fail the first time it is actually tested. 1 Peter 1 verse 6-7 declares exactly what that kind of fire produces in a person willing to endure it. These have come so that the proven genuineness of your faith, of greater worth than gold, which perishes even though refined by fire, may result in praise, glory, and honor. Genuineness proven, not created from nothing but revealed, the way fire reveals which metal was actually valuable underneath the surface impurities. Every season that felt like it was breaking you down was doing something far more specific than random damage. It was removing exactly what needed to be removed, so that what remained could hold weight it was never able to hold before. That distinction matters. Punishment has no aim beyond pain. Refinement has a very specific outcome in view the entire time. There is a practical way to test which one you are actually walking through. Punishment leaves a person smaller, more fearful, more reactive over time. Refinement, even while it hurts, tends to leave a person steadier, clearer, and less rattled by the next test than they were by the last one. Measure your own trajectory honestly, and you will likely find evidence of the second one rather than the first. Give this test some real time before you draw a conclusion from it. A single hard week is not enough data to judge an entire season by. Look instead at who you were entering this fire, compared to who you are now, measured over months rather than days, and let that longer view settle the question. 7. The blueprint hiding in plain sight. Look back honestly at the specific sequence of your life, and a pattern becomes visible that felt like pure chaos while you were living through it in real time. Jeremiah 29 verse 11 states the claim behind that pattern directly. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future. plans already known, already decided, long before the specific chapters of your story that felt directionless actually played out. Jeremiah wrote those words to people living in exile, far from home, with no visible reason to expect anything good in their immediate future. The promise was not offered from a place of comfort. It was offered into genuine displacement, which is exactly why it carries the weight it does for anyone reading it from inside their own version of exile. Psalm 139 verse 16 goes even further back than that. Your eyes saw my unformed body. All the days ordained for me were written in your book before one of them came to be. Every day written before it happened, not a vague general blessing, a specific ordered sequence, decided before you existed to live through any of it. So the chapter you are currently living, however confusing it feels in real time, was never left to chance the way it may have felt. It was already accounted for in a book you were never shown in advance, the same way a reader on page 10 cannot see how chapter 30 resolves, even though the author already finished writing it. Picture standing at the edge of a cliff at night, losing your footing, certain the fall is about to happen, only to land on a hidden platform built into the rock that you could not see from where you were standing. You never knew the platform existed. Whoever built it did not build it after you started falling. They built it long before you ever got close to that particular edge. This is what the pattern in your own life actually looks like, once enough time has passed to see it clearly. The stranger who appeared exactly when you needed information nobody else had. The disaster that dissolved right before impact for reasons nobody could fully explain. None of it was improvised in the moment. It was already built into the blueprint before you ever needed to stand on it. Most people only recognize the platform was there after they have already landed on it. Very few people trust it exists while they are still mid-fall, still certain the ground is about to disappear entirely. Learning to trust the blueprint before you can see it fully is the harder, more valuable version of this same lesson. That kind of trust is not naive optimism pretending danger is not real. It is confidence built on a track record, your own track record, of platforms that turned out to be exactly where you needed them even when you could not see them coming. The next fall does not need to feel any less frightening for you to trust it the same way it has held every time before, even the falls you have already forgotten because the platform did its job so completely. 8. Why they're panicking now. Your enemies are not simply uncomfortable anymore. They are unraveling, and the part that terrifies them most is that they cannot identify exactly what they are actually up against. Psalm 27 verse 2-3 settles what actually happens to anyone who advances against a person under real protection. When the wicked advance against me to devour me, it is my enemies and my foes who will stumble and fall. Though an army besiege me, my heart will not fear. Notice who stumbles in that verse, not the one under attack. The ones doing the attacking, tripping over a resistance they never planned for, because they assumed the target was undefended. David wrote that verse while actually being pursued, not from a place of theoretical safety. The fear he describes not having was fear he had every earthly reason to feel. His confidence was not naivety about the danger. It was trust that the danger was not the whole story. Proverbs 28 verse 1 captures the specific symptom your enemies are currently experiencing, whether or not they can name it themselves. The wicked flee, though no one pursues, but the righteous are as bold as a lion. Nobody is chasing them. Nothing external is actually hunting them down. And still they run, startled by their own conscience, unable to explain the dread that shows up the moment your name enters the room. Fear like that is exhausting to live with because it has no clear source to confront or resolve. A person being chased by something visible can at least fight back or run in a specific direction. A person haunted by an invisible dread has nowhere to aim their defense, which is exactly why it wears them down faster than any direct confrontation ever could. Bold as a lion is the phrase worth sitting with in that proverb, not because the righteous have nothing to fear, but because their confidence is anchored somewhere the fear cannot reach. That same anchor is available to you in whatever room currently feels tense, regardless of how unraveled the people in it have become, and regardless of how long their unraveling takes to finish playing out. They spent years assuming you could be shaped, pressured, or absorbed into whatever version of you served their comfort. You never bent the way the pattern predicted you would. That refusal, quiet and consistent, is precisely what they cannot forgive and cannot explain to themselves. They keep asking who is protecting you. The honest answer terrifies them more than any confrontation could, because it means they were never actually fighting you at all. None of this requires an explanation from you directly. Their unraveling is not a project you need to manage or accelerate. It is already in motion on a timeline entirely outside your control, and your only responsibility in the middle of it is to keep being exactly the version of yourself that unsettled them in the first place. Resisting the urge to explain yourself to people actively unraveling is harder than it sounds. Silence in that moment can feel like leaving something important unsaid. It is not. It is simply refusing to hand them a script they can use to make their own confusion make sense again, a script that was never yours to write for them in the first place. 9. The real gift was time. What you were actually given during your hardest seasons was never money, applause, or platform. It was time, and time is the one resource your enemies never accounted for when they built their plans against you. Ecclesiastes 3 verse 11 names why time carries the weight it does. He has made everything beautiful in its time. Not immediately, not on your preferred schedule. In its time on a timeline you do not control and were never meant to control. Its promise is not that everything feels beautiful the moment it happens. It promises beauty arrives in its time, which means the season that currently feels the furthest from beautiful may simply not have reached its appointed moment yet. Galatians 6 verse 9 adds the specific instruction for how to hold that waiting well. Let us not become weary in doing good, for at the proper time we will reap a harvest if we do not give up. The proper time arriving specifically for people who do not quit somewhere in the middle of it. Notice the condition attached to that promise. The harvest is not guaranteed regardless of what you do in the meantime. It is guaranteed if you do not give up, which means the waiting itself is not a passive holding pattern. It is an active test of whether you will keep doing good during the exact stretch of time when doing good feels least rewarded. While you were being given the time to heal, rebuild, and sharpen, the people working against you were being given something else entirely, enough rope to eventually expose exactly who they were, without you ever needing to lift a hand to reveal it. Time sharpens whoever is willing to be shaped by it, and it exposes whoever refuses to be honest inside of it. Both things happen on the same clock, whether either side realizes it or not. Consider how much of your own growth actually required time rather than a single dramatic breakthrough. The patience you have now, the discernment you did not used to have, the ability to sit in discomfort without needing to fix it immediately. None of that arrived instantly. It accumulated slowly across exactly the stretch of time you may have once resented having to live through. There is a particular kind of grief in realizing how much time you spent wishing away a season that was actually doing necessary work in you. That grief is worth acknowledging honestly rather than rushing past. You are allowed to mourn the difficulty of a season even while recognizing what it eventually produced. Both things can be true without canceling each other out. Romans 8 verse 31 asks the only question that actually needs answering once you understand what has actually been happening this entire time. What then shall we say in response to these things? If God is for us, who can be against us? That is not a rhetorical flourish. It is a genuine question, and the honest answer is that nobody who has ever stood against you was ever standing against you alone. You were never the casualty in this story. You were always meant to be its conclusion, the proof that every plan built to erase you underestimated exactly who had already stepped in on your behalf, long before you understood any of it yourself. Carry this forward as settled fact, not as a feeling you need today's proof to keep believing tomorrow. What has protected you this far was never dependent on your ability to see it, and it has no intention of stopping now that you finally do. 2 Timothy 4 verse 17 carries Paul's own testimony of exactly this kind of protection given from inside a genuinely dangerous situation. But the Lord stood at my side and gave me strength, so that through me the message might be fully proclaimed and all the Gentiles might hear it. And I was delivered from the lion's mouth. Delivered, not from a hypothetical danger, but from something Paul describes in the most literal terms available to him. If that kind of standing beside was available to him in a Roman courtroom facing execution, it was never going to be unavailable to you in whatever room you have been standing in. Here is the practical weight of everything you just walked through. Stop demanding visible proof before you trust the protection that has already been operating your entire life. The evidence was never absent. It was simply working from a vantage point you were not positioned to see until now. Look back at the pattern honestly. Name what you can now identify as intervention rather than luck, and let that recognition change how you face whatever is still ahead. Naming it matters more than it might seem. A pattern left unnamed stays vague, easy to doubt the next time fear shows up uninvited. A pattern named specifically, out loud, becomes something you can actually stand on the next time the ground feels uncertain beneath you. You are not walking into your future unguarded. You never were. The same hand that redirected the last decade of your life has no plans to step back now that the story is finally becoming visible to you. Walk forward the way someone walks who has finally seen the hills full of horses, no longer needing the fear to convince them anything, because the fear was only ever telling half the story. Before we bring this to God together, sit with whatever this stirred in you, the relief, the recognition, or the quiet grief of realizing how long you carried this alone in your own mind without knowing you never actually had to. Let's hand all of it to the one who was never actually absent. Father God, we thank you first, because every hidden intervention we are only now recognizing was real long before we had the eyes to see it. Thank you for the angels you commanded concerning us, for the hedges you placed around us without asking our permission, for the kings and circumstances you quietly redirected on our behalf, while we assumed we were simply having a good day. We bring before you everyone who has just recognized, for the first time, how much protection they have actually been living inside of. Give them eyes to see the pattern clearly, the way you opened the servant's eyes at Dothan, so that fear no longer gets the final word in situations you already have fully covered. For the ones still in the middle of an unseen battle, still wondering why an attack has not let up yet, we ask for endurance that trusts your timing over our own impatience. Remind us that some threats take longer to silence than others, not because you are slower, but because the timing of the silencing is exactly as precise as everything else you do. Soften whatever bitterness has formed in us toward the people who tried to tear us down. Let us see them with clarity instead of resentment, trusting that you have already handled what they intended and that we were never called to manage their correction ourselves. Lord, guard us from turning this protection into pride. What you have done for us was never a reward for being better than anyone else. It was mercy extended to people who needed it exactly as much as everyone we have ever been tempted to look down on. Keep us humble stewards of a story that was never fully ours to begin with. Teach us to hold this truth without weaponizing it against the people who doubted us. Let recognizing our own protection make us gentler toward others still waiting to recognize theirs, rather than harder toward anyone who has not yet seen what we are only now beginning to see clearly ourselves. We thank you that the same eyes that have been ranging throughout the earth on our behalf are not finished yet, and that whatever remains hidden about our story is still safely in your hands. Help us walk forward steady, grateful, and awake to what has always been true, even during the years we could not yet see it. Strengthen anyone right now who is still waiting for their own eyes to be opened, still standing in the middle of what feels like an overwhelming siege with no visible way out. Give them the same gift Elisha gave his servant, not a different situation, but new eyes to see the situation they are already standing inside of, surrounded by more help than fear will ever let them count. We ask all of this in the name of Jesus, who endured the ultimate abandonment so that we would never actually have to face one of our own. Amen. If this named something you needed to hear, pass it to someone who still thinks they've been surviving alone. A like, a comment, or a share puts this in front of someone who needs it today. Subscribe if you want to keep uncovering what has actually been operating underneath the surface of your life. And may the same protection that has carried you this far keep working, keep covering, and keep proving faithful long after this message ends.